Federal prosecutors now filing their first criminal charges in connection with yesterday's riots at the Capitol. Here to break it all down for us, NBC News investigations correspondent Tom Winter. Tom, I've been dying to talk to you all day. I have so many questions for you. First off, let's start with who's being charged and what are those charges that we're hearing about tonight?
Right. So we've got two specific sets of charges, some that are being brought by what we would normally call state cases, in this case, Washington, D.C. cases. Then we have federal cases. Let's start on the state side. So you've got right now almost 80 arrests that have been made in conjunction with either violations of curfew or with the violent events that we saw yesterday at the Capitol. Some of those charges are quite serious. They include possession of weapons charges, also illegalities as it relates to magazines. So people essentially having too much ammo or having magazines that are too large. So they had concealed weapons on their person, including charges involving assault of police officers. So those arrest totals are starting to ramp up. Notably, though, a significant amount of those arrests happen outside of the Capitol grounds and are more tied to things that happen after those people left the Capitol, Allison.
Yeah, so let's talk about what happened at the Capitol, Tom. Capitol Police say they arrested 14 people yesterday, including 11 for unlawful entry. But I mean, it was really obvious that way more than 11 people stormed the Capitol. Do you expect that we'll see any more of those types of charges? And is there any indication, because so many people are wondering about this, whether domestic terrorism charges could come up here at all?
Well, I think, it's possible on the federal level. So to answer your question, yes, let's start there. I think that there's going to be more arrests. Obviously, there's a lot of these. I mean, we've been showing the video. We've been showing it for the last day. A lot of these people have been captured on video. Today, police in Washington, D.C. Put out a PDF, essentially a PowerPoint presentation of all the people of interest that they are looking for that were inside the Capitol to make those charges. We're going to see more federal charges come up, and I know we're going to talk about that, and I want to get to that in a moment. But I think that you're going to see charges. The easiest charges that can be made are those unlawful trespassing charges, unlawful access to the Capitol. With respect to domestic terrorism, if this was any other building than the Capitol, if it was anything other than the electoral vote that was essentially being recorded yesterday, then I think, yes, you would see domestic terrorism charges because it fits from a federal standpoint, domestic terrorism in those statutes perfectly. They were trying to intimidate or coerce the government of the United States, and that they broke federal laws in doing so. So from a federal perspective, normally this would perfectly work within domestic terrorism charges. Allison, though, I think because they were involved with actually disrupting Congress and in the actual U.S. electoral process, I think there's a slew of other charges that might eventually come to bear here.
All right, so we're talking about a lot of different agencies, a lot of different types of charges. The acting D.C. U.S. attorney said that his office has charged 55 people with a range of offenses. How are those charges different from the charges coming from Capitol Police? Just to be clear kind of on what's what here.
Right, exactly. So these charges seem to be a little bit more dialed into, they're not curfew charges. These are charges that directly have to do with the incidents that happened at the Capitol yesterday. So what are we talking about? We're talking about people that had guns at the Capitol, loaded guns. We're talking about people that beat cops, according to the allegations. We're talking to one individual who, according to the charging documents, had 11 Molotov cocktails. That's a lot, Allison. Wow. 11 Molotov cocktails in an environment like that. You think you're looking at smoke now. 2 or 3 Molotov cocktails in a building like the Capitol could have caused a tremendous amount of damage and perhaps even more loss of life. Certainly could have injured people just carrying those around. They're volatile. So when you look at those type of things, they're extremely serious. Weapons charges inside the Capitol, quite serious. So I think these federal charges where you're going to start to see the people that were inside the Capitol yesterday creating havoc, being violent, actions that led to death, actions that led to a tremendous amount of destruction of property. You're going to see them get into trouble. Also, there is the concern about information that may have been taken yesterday from the Capitol. For people that were doing that, those charges could be quite serious. So I think it's tip of the iceberg from a federal charging standpoint. How much they'll be hampered, though, by arrests not being made yesterday at the Capitol while they were still inside. That's a question that remains to be seen, Allison.
Yeah, Tom, let me ask you another question about some of the things they might have gotten away with. You referenced this. Senator Jeff Merkley was tweeting earlier that his laptop was stolen during the riots yesterday. Given that some of these rioters were storming congressional offices, is there any concern that perhaps they could have had access to sensitive or even classified information?
Yes, there's definitely a concern about that, and we're starting to hear that tonight, that there may have been national security items that were taken. I mean, I saw yesterday, and this is another failure by the leadership of the Capitol Police. There needed to be, or the sergeant at arms, could be either or, in fairness. There needed to be a system where when you have an incident like that, you lock down those computers. It is possible to lock down computers remotely. That did not happen. We saw people tweeting out the screens that were wide open to anybody that wanted to sit there in Speaker Pelosi's office. That's somebody who's read in on a significant amount of classified information. So I think, yes, there is definitely a concern. Also, anybody could have mixed in with this crowd yesterday. Could there have been a foreign intelligence officer? That's something that a senior law enforcement official that has a lot of experience in these type of unrest incidents that I spoke with at a major city police department said that they were concerned about. Could a foreign intelligence officer have mixed in with this crowd, gotten in there, put a USB drive in, put malware on top of these computers? Awful lot of concerns. This incident, while it may be resolved for now, there's a lot more investigations that need to be conducted here, Allison.
Yeah, Tom, I want to play a clip of former Chief of Capitol Police Terrence Gaines talking about what happened yesterday. Take a listen.
I thought it would be impossible to storm the Capitol. Clearly, there's failures. There has to be a lot of questions asked and answers given. What is very clear is the police underestimated the violent crowd and the size of it, and they overestimated their ability to control it.
So, Allison, listening
Tom,
to the...
That's a former Capitol Police chief saying even he thought storming the Capitol was impossible. What are your sources saying about how that could possibly happen?
Right. So my colleague Andrew Blankstein and I looked at a couple of different and talked to a couple of different major city police departments that wanted to, not on the record because they didn't want to criticize another law enforcement agency, but they did want to talk about this. And they said, look, there was a tremendous lack of barriers here. People were able to just essentially walk in at one point. What's up with the glass there? What's up with the doorways? How come people were able to break into those areas? I looked at some of the videos yesterday. You saw 3 or 4 officers with only one line of barricades. There was no tear gas. There were no non-lethal ammunitions. I'm talking about rubber bullets. There was no PPE for the officers. I mean, there's a significant concern here that these people were able to run amok on the Capitol. I mean, we're looking at the video there. A little bit of breaking news, though, Allison. While we were talking about this and while you were speaking with Monica Alba, the police union for the Capitol Police has come out. They've called for the current police chief's job. On top of that, they said that they're frustrated and demoralized with respect to the lack of planning yesterday that went into this. And they said that they valued people's lives, the lives of Congress and the lives of people that were in the Capitol lawfully over the destruction of property yesterday. So clearly they are themselves upset. And a lot of people in law enforcement said, hey, don't blame the officer on the ground. Blame the people that came up with this plan or lack thereof, Allison.
Yeah, Tom, I have another question for you about the Capitol Police. They released their first public statement earlier saying that they are conducting a thorough review of this incident, the security planning and policies and procedures. But you've pointed out in your reporting today that the Capitol Police, unlike other police departments, are exempt from public records requests. What does that mean here? I mean, does that mean we could potentially not know the results of their investigation? How does this complicate everything?
Well, I mean, they ultimately respond to Congress, and Congress can absolutely get access to whatever documents that they want to get access to. They run the Capitol Police. So it's kind of it's not quite the inmates running the asylum, but Congress does run their own police department here. So they do have the ability to get the documents that they need. What creates an issue for an investigative reporter such as myself. I'm not able to get access to those documents. I'm not able to independently examine them as I might another police department. So from a reporting standpoint, there is a troubling lack of transparency, particularly when you look at the fact that this is a 2,300-member agency that's including civilians and sworn and uniformed officers, and an agency that receives $460 million each year as part of their annual budget. Perhaps it's time for a little bit more transparency, given the stunning lack of security and the absolute failure that happened yesterday, Allison.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. I got one last question for you because I know I do need to let you go. We've been talking so much about the charges here. Yesterday, when asked if he was looking into the president's role, the acting D.C. U.S. attorney said, quote, "We are looking at all actors here." Could the president potentially face charges in this?
He certainly did not take that off the table, and he would have done so if that was the case.
Yeah.
Look, you had the president yesterday being very clear, saying, we're going to march. I want to march over to the Capitol, directing those protesters where to go. You have statements made by his personal attorney, trial by combat. He may not have meant that there should have been a trial by combat inside the Capitol. But when you whip a crowd up into that frenzy, and it wasn't necessarily just Rudy Giuliani yesterday, but when you speak with them and you're in a crowd is excited like that, and you have situations where you have 30, 40, 50, 100 protesters versus one police officer, you get to the point where it's not a point of reason anymore, that there needed to be a physical pushback. Yeah. And so I think when the U.S. Attorney's Office takes a look at this, they have to look at the president's public statements that were made leading up to this. I mean, the fact that the Washington, D.C. police chief could say that they hadn't expected some sort of an assault on the Capitol, there's very clear Twitter postings and social media postings in the days leading up to this, not yesterday afternoon, in the days leading up to this that show that there was definitely an effort to go to the Capitol where the vice president was, where this electoral vote tally was occurring. Allison, just a stunning lack of preparedness and a lack of a plan. And now we'll see if people end up facing the consequences up into the president.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, when we talk about yesterday, I think in one word, Leanne Caldwell described it best: insane. An absolutely unprecedented day on our nation's capital. I have been watching your reporting on MSNBC all day long today and dying to ask you questions myself. So thank you so much for spending so much time with us today. I know Americans and our viewers have a whole lot of questions, too. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.